They laughed at her in the middle of the street, and no one dared to stop them, not because they didn't see, but because they knew exactly who those men were, and what they were capable of, and in that moment, an old woman stood alone behind a small food cart, her hands trembling slightly as she held a piece of bread, her eyes calm but tired, like someone who had already seen too much in life, and still chose silence over fear. She did not argue, she did not shout, she simply listened as they mocked her, as they pushed her cart, as one of them grabbed a piece of food and threw it on the ground, calling her useless, calling her weak, and the people around lowered their eyes, pretending they had somewhere else to be, because in that town, power did not come from kindness, it came from fear, and those men had plenty of it. She bent down slowly, picked up the bread, brushed off the dust, and placed it back, as if dignity could still be saved in small, quiet gestures, and one of the men laughed even louder, leaning close to her face, his voice sharp, telling her she should disappear, that no one would care if she did. She nodded gently, not in agreement, but in acceptance of the moment, because she understood something they did not, that storms pass, even the loudest ones. Behind her stood two young women, silent witnesses, their faces tight with anger, but their feet frozen, because courage is easy until it costs something, and here, it cost everything. The men finally stepped back, satisfied with their cruelty, and walked away like kings of a broken kingdom, leaving behind silence, scattered food, and a woman who slowly began to fix her cart again, piece by piece, like she had done many times before, like life had taught her to do. Hours passed, and the street returned to normal, as if nothing had happened, but inside her small home that night, she sat alone, holding an old photograph in her hands, her fingers tracing the face of a young man in uniform, her son, her pride, her quiet strength, and she whispered softly, not asking for revenge, not asking for justice, just hoping he was safe wherever he was. Far away, in a place where silence was discipline and strength was measured in endurance, her son paused, as if something inside him had shifted, like a distant echo reaching him without words, and though he did not know what had happened, he felt it, that invisible thread between a mother and her child tightening with concern. Days passed, and the men returned, because people like them always do, not for need, but for control, and this time they demanded money, more than she could ever earn, calling it protection, calling it business, and she quietly shook her head, her voice soft but firm, saying she had nothing to give, and that answer was enough to anger them again. They overturned her cart, sent food rolling across the pavement, and one of them raised his hand, not just to scare her this time, but to hurt her, and before he could strike, one of the girls behind her stepped forward, her voice shaking but loud enough to break the moment, telling them to stop, and for a second, just a second, the world held its breath. The men turned, their smiles cold, amused by the sudden bravery, and they warned her, gently, almost kindly, that courage like hers could end badly, and she stepped back, her fear stronger than her anger, because reality is heavy, and not everyone can carry it for long. The old woman placed her hand on the girl's arm, a silent thank you, and also a silent request to let it go, because she had lived long enough to know that some fights are not won by standing in the fire. That night, she sat again in her small room, the photograph still in her hands, and this time, her eyes closed longer, her breathing slower, as if she was holding onto something deep inside, not fear, not anger, but hope, the quiet kind that does not speak loudly, but stays, patiently, waiting for its moment. Somewhere far away, her son received a message, short, simple, from a neighbor who had finally found the courage to speak, not telling the full story, just enough to plant a seed, and that was all it took. He did not react with anger, not immediately, because he had been trained to control that, to hold it, to understand it, and he sat still for a long time, reading the message again and again, his jaw tightening, his eyes growing colder, not with rage, but with clarity. He requested leave, calmly, professionally, no urgency in his voice, no emotion in his words, and when permission was granted, he simply nodded, packed his things, and began his journey home, not as a soldier seeking revenge, but as a son returning to his mother. Back in the town, nothing had changed, the men still ruled the streets, the people still looked away, and the old woman still stood behind her cart, serving food with the same quiet dignity, as if nothing could break her, and maybe nothing could, because strength does not always shout, sometimes it just endures. When her son arrived, he did not go to her immediately. He stood at a distance, watching, observing, understanding the rhythm of the place, the patterns of fear, the faces of those who held power, and those who suffered under it, and he saw everything he needed to see without asking a single question. That evening, he walked to her, slowly, and when she saw him, her eyes filled, not with tears of pain, but with relief, with warmth, with a love that needed no words, and she touched his face gently, as if confirming he was real, as if making sure the world had not taken him away from her. He smiled softly, asked about her day, listened as she spoke of small things, leaving out the truth, protecting him even now, and he let her, because he already knew. The next morning, the men returned again, loud, confident, unaware that the balance had shifted, unaware that their story was already changing, and as they approached the cart, ready to repeat their routine, they noticed him standing there, calm, silent, just watching. They laughed at first, assuming he was just another man, another face, another nobody, and one of them stepped forward, telling him to move aside, that this did not concern him, and he did not move. He simply looked at them, not with anger, not with fear, but with a quiet certainty that made something inside them hesitate, just for a moment. The street grew still, people sensed something different, something they could not yet name, and the air felt heavier, like before a storm. He spoke then, his voice low, controlled, asking them one simple question, why, and they laughed again, louder this time, mocking the simplicity of it, mocking him, mocking the situation, because arrogance often blinds people to the moment everything changes. What they did not know was that power built on fear collapses quickly when faced with someone who does not feel it, and in that moment, they were no longer in control, even if they did not realize it yet. The confrontation was not loud, it was not dramatic, it was precise, controlled, and over before most people understood what had happened, because real strength does not need to prove itself loudly, it simply acts when necessary. One by one, their confidence faded, their laughter disappeared, replaced by confusion, then fear, and finally silence, as they realized they were not dealing with someone ordinary. The street watched, not with excitement, but with disbelief, as the untouchable became vulnerable, as the powerful became powerless, and for the first time, the balance shifted in favor of justice, not loud, not celebrated, but undeniable. When it was over, he did not stand over them, he did not speak harshly, he simply stepped back, returned to his mother, and helped her lift the cart, placing everything back in order, as if restoring something more than just food, as if restoring dignity itself. The authorities arrived later, called by witnesses who finally found their voices, and the men who once ruled the streets were taken away, not as kings, but as criminals, their power gone as quickly as it had come. The town slowly changed after that, not overnight, but enough, people began to look up again, to speak a little louder, to stand a little stronger, because sometimes all it takes is one moment, one person, to remind everyone else that fear is not permanent. And the old woman, she returned to her quiet life, behind her cart, serving food with the same gentle hands, the same calm smile, but now there was something different in the air around her. Not fear, not pity, but respect, the kind that cannot be demanded, only earned. Her son did not stay long, he never intended to, his life was elsewhere, his duty called him back, but before he left, he sat with her one last time, sharing tea in silence, a silence full of understanding, full of love, and she looked at him, her eyes soft, her voice steady, telling him she was proud, not because he fought, but because he remained who he was, calm, patient, and just. He nodded, not saying much, because he knew she understood him better than anyone ever could, and as he walked away, the street watched him differently, not with fear, not even with admiration, but with something deeper, recognition, because they had seen what quiet strength looks like, and they would not forget it.